Those running for office. Your government, your candidates, your vote. Today, the candidates present their views on the issues surrounding their campaigns, right here on couvdotcom.
Hello, welcome to couvdotcom's coverage of Clark County Primary 2012. This live webcast is going to be available at couvdotcom within an hour of our conversation here today for your viewing at any time to help you make your choices for your upcoming ballot in these upcoming elections in August as well as in November. I'm Victoria Taft and I'm your moderator on this webcast. And normally you can hear my talk show on AM 860 KPAM radio from 11 to 3 every weekday. But today I hope to be able to be a moderator and a question asker of the people who have given their time today to come and answer your questions, to make sure that you get your questions answered in anticipation of the upcoming election in August as well as in November. Now, I'm privileged to be able to conduct some of these interviews of these people who are surrounding me right now. Eileen Q-Tub, Julie Olson, Don Benton, Paul Harris, and Liz Pike are all here today. They've been asked, as has everyone in their contests. In every election, we have asked every single person who is a candidate for office to come on and talk with couvdotcom's audience in a live webcast just like this. These people were the ones who said yes. The people who said no: Annette Cleveland, Tim Probst, Monica Stonier, Jim Gitze, David Shehorn, Ryan Gompert. Forgive me if I've mispronounced your name. If you were here, I would be able to pronounce it properly. Just saying. Now, these people I just mentioned are all Democrats, actually, the folks who were not able to be here today. They have declined to be interviewed, but I have a feeling that once they get a look at couvdotcom's professionalism, the transparency here on the web, they'll say yes. They'll come back and we'll have an opportunity to have a discussion with them as well. Had we had their participation, I expect we would have had smaller groupings and several more programs. But I want to say thank you to everyone who's given their time this afternoon to be here today, for the people in Vancouver and throughout Clark County. And we hope to, at one point in time, after this goes live on couvdotcom, which it currently is, but you will have a podcast and the ability to access this recording at any time you want. It will also be available for you on cable, local cable. So we're hoping that that comes to pass and gives all these people who are willing to give up their time a little free advertising, actually. So let's start out by asking you what office you're running for, where that is geographically in Clark County, and in your mind, what qualifies you to hold that office. And Paul Harris, we're going to start down at the end of the table with you. Tell everybody who you are, what qualifies you to be in office, what you're running for, and where that is in Clark County. These offices in state government and local government are sometimes very difficult to tell whether or not that person is the person for whom you're supposed to vote or is in your district. So why don't you go ahead and say so.
So Victoria, I'm running to be reelected in the 17th District, Position 2. My district runs from the 205, and it will go east of 205 over to 192nd, from 192nd to the river, to the Camas borders, and then up to Battleground. So it's basically that area. They've cut out a little bit of 192nd and actually runs to 162nd at, is it 18th Street now? Yep. 18th Street. Don and I are in the same district.
He's referring to Don Benton in case Don's not in the shot at the moment.
So Don and I are in the same district. I think what qualifies me, I've been a small business owner for a number of years, run my own business. I believe I have an opportunity to listen to the public. I've done very well at listening, and I think that's what a legislator does. He needs to listen to both sides of an issue and determine where he believes his constituents will stand. And sometimes you got to make some tough votes, but I believe I can do that, and I have done that.
All right, very good. Our next contender, our next candidate is Julie Olson. And Julie, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and why don't you tell them what you're running for and where geographically it is?
I'm also in the 17th.
I'm sorry, Liz. I didn't mean to. No, let's go with you, and then we'll just forgive me.
Skip Liz.
Sorry, Liz. Still love you though. Your hair looks great.
So I'm also running in the 17th, and hope to be Paul's seatmate and a cohort of Senator Benton as well in November/January. I'm a native Washingtonian. I've been on the Ridgefield School Board for 6 years. I've been the president of the school board for the last 4 years. So that gives me a little bit of background in terms of qualifications for this next step politically. I've also been in sales and sales management my entire career. So I've got the business side as well. I've been a small business owner also. My experience on the school board and the things we've done in Ridgefield, I think, also add some experience and value to this position as it relates to working with others and trying to find the best solutions for our communities as we look at the challenges we're facing here in the state.
And there are plenty of challenges. Liz Pike.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm running in the 18th Legislative District, Position 2. This seat was vacated by Ed Orcutt recently through redistricting. He's now running in the 20th. And I'm running to continue his conservative leadership that he's provided to the citizens in the 18th. I have 30 years of private sector business experience. The last 17, I've operated my own independent business. So signing the front side of my own paycheck for the last 17 years has given me a keen understanding about some of the challenges that our businesses in Southwest Washington face today. I'm also a former elected member of the Camas City Council, served for 4 years, and that taught me a lot about municipal government and budgeting, and also about a lot of comprehensive land use issues. So I think that experience, coupled with my broad business background, makes me well suited to reform Washington when I go to Olympia in January.
Eileen Qtub.
Thank you, Victoria. My district is the 49th district, and I'm running for the state senate in that district. It is mostly the downtown Vancouver and the urban growth boundary of Vancouver. It goes to west of 205, and where 205 and I-5 meet, there's a small little triangle. It goes all the way down to the river and over by Lake Vancouver, and that's primarily the 49th district. I, too, have been a small business owner. I've been a real estate broker. I've been a real estate appraiser. Varied careers. I did grow up in Clark County, left in my mid-20s to see the rest of the states, and one of them was Oregon, one was North Carolina. But when I came back to Oregon after being in North Carolina, I served in the Oregon State Legislature, first the House and then in the Senate. So I understand what it takes to work across lines and bring about some changes to the state. So also, I have the experience of being a mother, a grandmother, and wife, and so I have life experience, and I have to keep a budget in my home just like everybody else has to, and I think the state should do that too.
What a concept. Don Benton.
Thanks, Victoria. Thanks for having me, and thank you to couvdotcom for putting this on. It's unfortunate that my opponent could not be here. I was looking forward to actually discussing important issues to the citizens of this district. The 17th district, as Representative Harris has already said, if you start at the Columbia River on 205, take the 205 north, everything east of the 205, all the way clear till it joins the 5 up to the 219th, Main Street going into Battleground, south. So everything east of there, all the way over to 192nd. The largest, fastest growing area of Clark County has been the 17th district for the last, well, 20 years. I've been through redistricting before, and every time we go through redistricting, the district gets smaller and smaller and smaller because our population is growing so dramatically. I've served in the state senate since 1996, 4 terms. Prior to that, I served in the State House of Representatives. And many of your viewers may not know this is a part-time citizen legislature, so it's not my job and it's not my career. I have a real job. I've been self-employed since I was 17 years old. I did a little stint as the CEO of a company for a friend of mine, but other than that, for 35, 37 years, I've owned and operated my own companies and had to, make a payroll and balance a paycheck and sometimes go without a paycheck myself to make sure that the people that work for me got paid. So I think I understand what people want in a representative. I think when you hire someone to represent you to go to Olympia because you can't go yourself every day, you want them to have the same experiences and the same challenges and hopefully think the same way you do. When you vote for someone, you want to know, gee, would that person vote like I would vote if I was up there doing that? And so I always think about my 4 kids that I've raised, a couple of teenagers still in the house, getting ready to go off to college here in a couple of years, and the business challenges that I've had, and the property tax challenges, and challenges with my parents who were, got older and sick and needed help. And I mean, these life experiences, I think, qualify you to represent people in the way they would want to be represented.
All right, so we've got a little viewpoint, little niche little snapshot of everyone's life, their life experiences. Running for office, and couvdotcom, thank you very much for this live webcast that allows us to get this insight into some of the people who are running for office here. Now, let's start out the first question, and we're going to start down with Paul Harris, and we're going to ask this question. And I'll preface it by saying that voters in Clark County are among the hardest hit in the state. Clark County consistently has among the highest unemployment rates in Washington, and voters have made it abundantly clear. They have said they oppose new taxes. They can't afford them. They've opposed the income tax, the candy tax, and they've supported a 2/3 legislative majority it would take to raise taxes. But all we hear are plans for higher sales taxes around here, higher taxes, more money for the schools, etc. These are things, in my opinion, that scare away businesses and jobs. Do you agree with that assessment, and what do you plan to do to give these people relief, or do you dismiss it and you think there's another path, Paul?
Well, there has to be another path, Victoria, so I appreciate the question. I think probably the most important thing we can do right now, Liz Pike just sent me an email which was really interesting, and it was a great email. It was about the L&I rates are going to go up, about 19%. What are we short? How many?
$3.1 billion.
So we're short $3.1 billion. And we did L&I reform about a year ago in the state legislature, and we did a small reform. And I actually voted no on that because I knew that the reform was not large enough. I knew what we faced. We have to have reform in government. We have to make the burden on businesses less than greater. And that can be done. I mean, we have state representatives in the 49th that wanted to have a candy tax and got it, and it was repealed. We have a representative in the 49th that wants to get rid of the 2/3 majority to raise taxes. We do not want that. We do not need greater taxation on our citizens. What we need is less. We need less regulation, and our businesses will thrive. We just need less regulation. I was talking with you beforehand what was going on in Washougal with one of the last linen plants that's running, and Department of Ecology came in, and we have to have safe plants. But on the same token, we're competing nationally, so we have to be really careful with the regulations that we put upon businesses. We need to reduce those regulations, we need to make it easier for businesses, and we will get greater taxes. We will.
Liz Pike.
On that same line, I am very, very interested in introducing legislation to allow private insurance companies to come in and compete for industrial insurance in our state. Much what Representative Harris was talking about. Our state L&I, Labor and Industries, is a state-run monopoly, and only 4 states in the whole country have a state-run industrial insurance program. Clearly, 46 other states have figured out how to do it better and more efficiently, so it's not so expensive for employers to hire new employees. So 2 of my goals, should I be elected to the legislature, is to bring about free market competition on industrial insurance so that our job producers can hire again, because it'll be less expensive. And the other one is, much like what Representative Harris said, that is reining in what I would call a rogue agency, the Department of Ecology. Too many environmental regulations. There's a cost-benefit analysis that needs to take place on every rule. And when the cost so far outweighs the benefit down here, we need to really rethink those. So I'm in favor of taking a hatchet, not a scalpel, to the Department of Ecology. And we are, these are, I'm not a doctor.
Apparently.
But these are tough times, and they call for tough measures. And that's what I'm going to be about when I go to Olympia.
Julie Olson.
Well, piggybacking on both of these, when I'm out talking with business people in the community, I hear 2 things. I hear regulation, and so whether it's the Department of Ecology or any other state agency, I think they all need to be turned upside down. So regulation, we need to review, reform, and repeal. We need to take a broad look at all of those things that are really seriously impacting our businesses here. And I hear L&I, I hear workers' compensation insurance, and repeatedly those are the 2 issues that come up. In addition to that, when it comes to budgets and taxes, we need to do more with less. We still have increasing revenues in this state, but we still need more revenue, so they say. We need to do more with less. So we need to take a look at what we're doing with the revenue that we have and be smarter about it.
Eileen Q-Tub.
Well, I think it's interesting that the 49th district, which people think is a fairly liberal district, actually voted for the 2/3 majority by about 72%, against the candy tax, or to repeal it by 65%, and 66% of the people voted against a new income tax. Clearly, they are not being represented in Olympia as they have voted, and so I really do want to go and address those issues. As I said in the introduction, you know, we in our homes have to look at our budgets and determine that if we don't have the money coming in, we need to reduce what's going out. Interestingly, the state seems to look at what's not coming in and see, once again, how they can extract it from the citizens. And I really want to protect the citizens from this extraction that happens and tighten the belt in the state legislature. I served on the budget committee the 6 years that I was in the state of Oregon. And it is easy to say that you can go and cut waste and you know, reduce fraud and everywhere. But you know, it is a hard job, but it can be done. So I'm not just flippantly saying that this needs to be done. It can be done. And furthermore, I just believe that it has to be done. It's just irresponsible not to do it. So.
Welcome to this live webcast on couvdotcom. I'm Victoria Taft, and I'm your moderator today. And these people have given their all. They've decided to get into the arena, and they've decided to run for office. And it is our pleasure to be able to discuss the issues of the day with them. We're very grateful for their time. Don Benton, did you want to take a stab at that question?
Just quickly, let me point out that ever since I have served the citizens of the 17th District, I have not voted for tax increases. I do not believe that we have to raise the revenue, because the revenue for the state of Washington has increased every single year anyway. We don't have to raise taxes to increase revenue. What we have to do is get more jobs and more companies and more people back to work, because if people go back to work, then they can pay their taxes and we have more revenue. So we really haven't had a revenue problem in Olympia. What we've had is a spending problem. We continue to spend under Democrat majority control more than we take in every single year. And it's been a pattern that has happened for a long, long time. And that's why I'm hoping that with my reelection, we'll be able to take Republican control of the state Senate. We'll be able to elect a Republican governor. And for the first time in 35 years under Republican executive leadership and Republican control of the Senate, we'll actually be able to reduce regulation, get the economy going, get some jobs going, and get my neighbors and my friends back to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the state legislature appears to be a dysfunctional body, as evidenced by the continual extra innings sessions in the last legislature just to get a budget. And Liz Pike, I'll start with you. Pinpoint what you think the problem was, what you would do if you were in the state legislature to remediate that kind of a problem.
Well, I think the biggest problem is not enough people are working right now. As Senator Benton mentioned, we need more employees, more taxpayers. And I think the culture of Olympia has been one of empire building, state agencies becoming bigger, more cumbersome, harder to work with, more roadblocks on business. That mentality has permeated Olympia for almost 3 decades. And that is the biggest problem. And I talk to a lot of people around the state, and particularly lobbyists. You know, they all want our ear this time of year because they want to influence us. And I'll listen to them just like I'll listen to anybody else. But it's amazing how they tell me that the state agency people just rotate around the state agencies over the last 30 years, because the lobbyists are the same players in the band for many decades also. And they remark how these people that work for agencies, they just kind of hop around from agency to agency. And I'm sure Don Benton, he's been a senator for 16 years, he can attest to this. So I think what really needs to happen is new leadership at the top, including Rob McKenna, who I'm devoutly supporting for governor. And with his administration, I don't know if a lot of voters realize this, but a governor makes something like 2,600 gubernatorial appointments when they get elected. So that alone will allow for a lot of house cleaning at the agency level. So that's what I think is the biggest problem, is entrenched bureaucrats.
All right, so now the state legislature is a dysfunctional, it appears to be dysfunctional. And the last time there appeared to be so many other things that the state legislature chose to do, holding the actual budget hostage. Now, so Julie Olson, what would you do, and how do you see the problem, and how would you go about fixing such a thing?
Well, that to me, that's an issue of leadership. You've got leaders on both sides in the Senate and the House. And if the leadership isn't insisting that our priority is a sustainable budget, and we spend 30 plus days on issues that aren't related to the budget, then we have a problem. And that's part of the dysfunction that I think that you talk about there. So,
well, somebody put together a bill and decide that for every day you go in overtime, you have to give back your money. Everybody.
You know, I think we should have some. I think we should have some.
Not
serious
that you're making bank on this or anything. I'm just saying. Somebody's got to feel the pain.
There needs to be some accountability for legislators to get the job done in the time allotted to do it. And I'm not saying it's easy, nor would I. You know, I wouldn't say that it was easy. But we have to set priorities, and that's our role as legislators: is to set priorities and do what our constituents are asking us to do. And when it comes to the budget, that's what our job is. So that's, to me, what the priority should be.
Eileen Q-Tub, tell me what your priorities are, how to pinpoint this
well,
problem.
I just completely agree that it is an issue of leadership. And it was very poor leadership and irresponsible for the legislature to go ahead and dismiss what is the primary job, and that is to the function of the state through the budget. And so I think, you know, a real novel thing would be also, when you're dealing with the budget, is to take the thing that takes the most of the funding and deal with it first. And then you don't have to fight over all these small things and then not be left with enough for the largest part of the budget, and then consequently ask for more taxes because schools need more funding. So if you started, for instance, with the education funding, which is a huge percentage of the budget, and decided what a basic education is first, then determine how this money is going to be allocated to the schools, to the classroom, and so forth, what the criteria is going to be. Then you move on to the other issues in the budget. But not dealing with the budget for over 30 days is completely irresponsible, and things need to change in the legislature.
Don Benton was in the throes of the wonderfulness that we call the state legislature in Olympia over this time, because we spoke on the air a lot about this on my show on KPAM, and you knew what the problem was. And how do you prevent that from happening again?
First of all, it's extremely frustrating when you're there trying to represent people and get something done, and the people that are running the show don't have any priorities, or their priorities seem to be out of whack. When we went to the legislature this year, I mean, even last year, the Republicans said, this is not sustainable. We're going to have to come back to special session and fix this. You guys have not fixed this problem. So we knew going into it this year. And so what happens? The Ways and Means chairman, who was appointed by the majority leader, which is determined by how many votes there are for a Democrat majority leader or a Republican. The Democrat majority leader chose a Ways and Means chairman whose job it is to get 25 votes for a budget. That's their only job. But our Ways and Means chairman, the Democrat Ways and Means chairman, appointed by the Democrat majority leader, spent the first 5 weeks of the legislative session getting 25 votes, but not for a budget. He was chasing 25 votes for his bill to change the definition of marriage. Now, no matter where you're at on that issue, and of course I'm opposed to changing the definition of marriage, that should not have been the priority for the first 5 weeks of the legislative session. We should have solved the budget crisis first. I don't think the definition of marriage is causing people to go without dinner, causing people to not have a roof over their heads, causing people not to have an education because teachers are being laid off.
And that's why I like to have Don on my
Okay,
show a lot.
and the fact is, we need to deal with the priorities that we're sent there to deal with. I don't think
right.
that was a priority for most citizens in this state.
Paul Harris, you were there in the throes as well. What do you do?
Wow, Don, that was good. I'm serious. Don, that was
It was good,
that was
yeah.
like a home run, because listen, we sat up there for 5 weeks and we're defining marriage, and the word I didn't hear the words jobs up there in 5 weeks
Exactly.
once.
Right. Exactly.
You know, so here we have people that are out of work and we're up there defining marriage. It was appalling. And then when we did start talking budget, we start talking about education, that we're going to cut education. Education is our paramount duty. Education should be the first thing that we should fund, not the last. And so what happens up there is complete dysfunction. But I tell you who's controlling that. It's not Senator Benton and myself, although Senator Benton had an opportunity to control, and we got a budget through. So when we have the controlling party, which is the Democrats, there is no control, and they're not addressing the issues. And that's what's sad. Is it's a little sad that I was a part of that, because really the Republicans aren't in control there. I'm sorry. We're in the minority, and we have to follow this dysfunctionality until we can get control.
You know, and I don't know that everybody gets an idea of what the milieu is in Olympia, how they can take a look at this and go, well, oh, that's what happened. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this today, and that's one of the reasons why I'm sure that at couvdotcom we'll have this webcast available for you. We're streaming live now. And people can come back and they can take a look at what your answers have been. They can come back, and I'm sure your foes, your political foes, will be doing oppo research when they're not salivating over the opportunity to have this and come back in the future. They should have been here, but they couldn't be here because they chose not to be here. But I'm not bitter. If they want to come on, we'll have them on, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm just teasing them because they expect me to tease them. Now, so let us ask about the big, this is the big elephant in the room. This is the Columbia River crossing. So I'm going to start with Don Benton on this. The Columbia River crossing is quickly turning out, in my estimation, to be a zombie project, and we're still, we're spending over $150 million so far, if not more, and $30,000 a month for rent. Thank goodness somebody has something to rent in Vancouver. But the thing is that at the end of this thing, in debt service, et cetera, this thing is going to be about $10 billion, and what it will be is essentially a conveyance for light rail. And it could be a lot cheaper if light rail were not a part of it, but that's just my own little problem with it. So characterize for voters the state of this project, in your opinion. The light rail system will obligate the Clark County voters to future maintenance and bond expenditures. They will have to pay maintenance and debt service on those things. And talk about that impact and what your stance is on it and what you plan to do in the state legislature about the Columbia River Crossing light rail project.
First of all, as you well know, because we've talked about this, that project has been a debacle almost from the very beginning. And I have fought for transparency. I have fought to try to, so people can see where the money's being spent and why it's being spent and what they're doing with it. Over $150 million down the rat hole with nothing to show for it. Nothing. And like you say, the project is scheduled to be a $3 billion or $4 billion. No, it'll be 6, 8, 10. That's the way these government projects go. And guess what? It won't do anything to solve the congestion in this county. There will still be 3 throughput lanes on the bridge when they're done spending $6 billion. So why would we spend $6 billion of taxpayers' money, obligate ourselves to ongoing taxes and tolls to get to work across the river? If you're one of the 60,000 constituents of mine that drive across the river every day, you're going to have to pay another $120 a month just for the privilege of going to work. Why would you do that if you're not going to increase capacity at all? Their own study shows that the day the new bridge opens, traffic will be backed up almost to Ridgefield. So why would you build it if you know that it's not going to help or solve congestion? There's only one reason, and that's because they want light rail in Clark County, and they see this bridge. In fact, the court case in Oregon proved that that was Metro's whole purpose in proposing the bridge, was to bring light rail into Clark County. It won't solve congestion. I've tried to stop it on the floor of the Senate with amendments to the transportation budget. I actually got an amendment passed last year, thank goodness, knock on wood, that will not allow any tolling on the 205 bridge, because they were going to do that too. But we've stopped that now, at least temporarily. But with Democrat control, they keep pushing this project, and it's never going to do what they claim it's going to do, and it will cost more. And so I've always said, look, they've got 11 bridges across the Willamette River in Oregon. Why can't we have 3 bridges across the Columbia? Why do we have to go with the same corridor when we know the corridor is full? All the way down to the Terwilliger curves, the corridor is full. It's full all the way to Ridgefield. Why don't we take our time, our effort, and our money and look at a real solution, which is a 3rd crossing across the Columbia River?
Could you have built a 3rd crossing for the Columbia River, just the actual crossing itself, not necessarily the exit, et cetera, with $150 million that they've spent in
it would probably be
that's
closer to it would probably be closer to about 200 or 250, but you could. You actually could build a bridge for almost what they've already spent.
So Eileen Q-Tub, now here what we have is we have the Columbia River crossing. What's your stand on that? And where do you think that it will go? Could you characterize what the current status is for you?
Well, I agree that this is a boondoggle, a debacle, whatever you want to call it, because the planning is just, again, the word irresponsible. We don't know where the money is gone. They're not accountable for it. But I would say with the $150 million that's been spent on planning, we have a bridge too short, is what we have, because they were supposed to make the bridge higher than it is. And the planning now has got a bridge that's, 95 feet, and the fabrication company that's down the river cannot get their things down the river.
Should there be a vote in Clark County on?
Absolutely. And I believe there is going to be. The last time was it the city council or the commissioners both, I don't know whether they both have to vote on it, but in order to put it on the ballot, there needs to be a vote on this. Clark County is not a large enough metropolitan area to support light rail. We found in Oregon when we had light rail, and I fought light rail there as well, because it's a crime collector and it really does not reduce congestion. And most people that get onto light rail are actually getting off of a bus onto light rail. So, you know, we need public transportation. Some people need that, and we need to keep that going. But let's put it in buses where you can change the route when demographics change, where you can go to different, you know, places, and you know, it just is. It is a boondoggle. It's too expensive, and frankly, having the mayor of Portland tell us in Vancouver what it is that we need to have is a little frustrating as well.
Julie Olson, should there be a clean vote on light rail in Clark County? Should it be binding? And what do you think about the project?
Yeah, I think the light rail piece is critical. I do think there should be a light rail vote in Clark County, and I do think it should be binding. I think if you were actually to look at the bridge project itself, and you took light rail out of it, you might be able to make a case for that crossing. I mean, I-5 is a mess. I was just on it today. That bridge, you know, it's a mess. So even if we were to look at that, improving that crossing, and even though there's still not going to be extra capacity, changing that crossing a little bit. I drive it all the time. You get over the bridge, you can get, traffic speeds up. It's just, it's backed up from the Vancouver side of the bridge all the way into town. But as soon as you get across the bridge, it opens up. So the bridge is a problem, just in terms of its accessibility to freight and to moving people across it. So if we were to even look at a new crossing, in my opinion, I would never support it with light rail. And I think the voters here should have a binding vote on that.
Elizabeth, do you think it should have a binding vote? So the people
I do, but people need to understand this vote this fall is not going to be binding at all.
Right.
All it is asking people if they want to pay another 1/10 of a penny on sales tax.
It won't even be a county-wide vote.
Right, it'll be a gerrymandered taxing district.
Thank you.
And they're going to ask people if they want to pay a little bit bump in their sales tax to pay for maintenance and operation. And Vancouver city leaders have already said in public meetings just recently that they will find a way to fund that maintenance and operation if this vote fails this fall. So citizens should, and Clark County should be aware of that.
I'm sure they are aware of that. People I talk to are aware of that. And Paul Harris, what you have is a collection of people who've been elected who believe that they know better than the people, and they don't listen to they're not listening to their constituents, at least in my estimation. They're listening to 1,000 Friends of Oregon, they're listening to everyone else, but they're not listening to the people in Clark County. Is that your estimation, or is that just too much to surmise on my part?
Oh no, I think you're exactly right. In fact, I thought it was odd that the city council actually considered and thought about a head tax for businesses. I sat there and said, you know, we talked about regulations earlier. Let's just make it easier to work in the city of Vancouver, and let's just add a head tax to every employer so we can pay for light rail. And I go, are you serious? Would you even consider that? You know, here's Charter Communication, who I just met with, who has 300 employees, and we're going to throw a head tax on those people? But do you think Charter's going to want to stay in Clark County if we throw a head tax on them? I mean, people, we've got to, no. Do not even head down that road. Let the people vote. If the people want this, that's fine. Many people look at the bridge as a job, as creating jobs. I look at this bridge project that it could be a job killer. You have people that are traveling. Don's right, we have 60,000 of my constituents that drive that bridge every day right now. There's only two places in the entire I-5 corridor where it goes down to 2 lanes in each direction, and that would be the city of Portland. And if you think Portland wants you in their car, you need to rethink that, people. You're going to get across the bridge maybe faster today, but let me tell you, if you throw more people onto that corridor, it's going to back up. And we're going to be paying tolls, and we're going to be backed up farther. So really think about this. Think about what we're doing.
Eileen Q-Chubb, we'll start with you on this next question. The state Supreme Court has ruled that not enough money is being spent on state public education, and in fact they've decreed that there should be more. What happened to the money in your estimation, and what's the solution to the problem?
What happened to the money?
I know, you weren't even there and I'm asking you. Sucker.
I suspect I suspect a lot of it is going to administration. You know, I don't know what happened to the money, but I'll sure look into it to find out what happened to the money, because
when you have the courts telling you that
yes.
Well, the dog ate their homework with the budget, that's a problem.
I really think that one of the things that the Supreme Court seemed to allude to, the Washington State Supreme Court seemed to allude to, was that this, first of all, that we need to provide a basic education. I don't think that that is defined, and the legislature, hopefully a Republican legislature, will be able to make that definition. But they also determined that it seemed more adult-based. The funding seemed to go to more adults than it did to kids in the classroom. So it needs to be more child-focused and less adult-focused in the spending.
Interesting. Julie Olson, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with Eileen, and there's some ways when you look at the budgeting piece for schools. You know, we've got local levies, we've got transportation, we have all, and if we can take a look at balancing those levies in with state dollars, what Eileen said earlier about moving that education budget out of the general fund first, fund education first, so we know what that is, then we've got some idea of how to allocate that money. The question about where does the money go, I think you have to look at each district. You know, I'm the president of a small school district, so it's pretty easy to see where our money goes, because we got 4 schools in our district. But what's the impediment that does not allow you to put the money where you think it should go? Because they said that it's not getting to the classroom. Well, that depends on the district. That depends on the budgeting at the individual district, and those numbers are available to see. The challenge is when you're in a larger district is really peeling back those budget line items, just like you would at the state budget, really peeling that back and finding out exactly where those dollars are going, and are you getting a return on the investment of those dollars? You know, we've spent the last number of years in Ridgefield with less and less revenue, but we haven't laid off any teachers. And that's because of the budgeting process that we've been through to make sure that the programs we are funding are sustainable, even if we have less dollars. Okay, Liz Mike, you've got a Supreme Court that says you must spend more money in the classroom. Now, as a state representative, you hope to go to Olympia and be able to make some impact there. What are you going to do?
Reform. We need to have charter schools in Washington State. There's successful charter schools for us to model after all over the United States that work. We need to allow charter schools. It's going to be on the ballot, I think, this fall. And charter schools will force competition in our public school system. And we must demand excellence at every level. We need to demand that every classroom has an excellent teacher, whether it's a property-rich district or a property-poor district. That needs to happen. We also need to take on the unions, quite frankly. I'm not going to get the endorsement of the Washington Education Association, but they, I think, stand in the way of quality education reform in this state. I believe in merit pay for excellent teachers. Let's reward the teachers that are achieving success with their students, and the ones that aren't, not so much, so that we encourage them to find some of their line of work.
Paul Harris, what do you say about this?
I served on the Evergreen School Board for 11 years, and while my kids were going through, I had 5 children go through the system, and it was a great school system. I think we need more flexibility in the districts. We have dollars that are allocated for certain portions. You know, a lot of people say, well, you have a beautiful school there. Well, there are absolute dollars that go to housing, there's absolute dollars that go to transportation, and yet there's not sometimes as many dollars that ends up in the classroom. What the McCleary court ruling said to me was there was a lot that said in that. You really need to be careful, because as I sat down with the teachers and discussed it with them, not only does it change that we're going to go to outcome-based education for the students, but it also goes that we're going to go outcome-based education for the teachers. meaning that the teachers themselves are going to have to change, and how we evaluate teachers is going to have to change. I did get the endorsement of the WEA, which is an interesting endorsement. Probably of all the endorsements I've got, it's the most interesting. And I believe I've been able to look at education in a little different way. We need to hold our school boards accountable. On the same token, we need to give them more flexibility, and we need to look at that. We're going to have to fund education better, and we're going to have to fully fund basic education, which is going to be interesting. As Eileen said, we're going to have to define what basic education means.
So I'm shocked that there's not a definition.
Oh, there is, but it's not all alike. And so that's one of the
right.
things that will happen this next year. I think there'll be a serious fight on what is basic education, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Don,
we really do.
what's your take on this? You've been ordered to spend more in the schools. Where'd the money go, and what do you plan to do about it?
Well, the money goes for all kinds of other things it probably shouldn't go for. Government, in my mind, and when you elect me and send me to Olympia, this is the way I think about your tax dollars. Government is designed to do things that people want, to provide services. Education is a top priority. Public safety is a top priority, and infrastructure is a top priority. And if you're not doing all three of those things extremely well, you shouldn't be spending taxpayers' money on anything else. Those should be your top priorities: public safety, public education, and a good infrastructure so that jobs and freight mobility and people can get goods and services. So we've spent this money on all these other things, and there's thousands of them. And like Paul and Julie have both said, they've been on a school board. I was on the community college board of trustees for many years, and what happens is, the fact is, they, meaning the legislature, tries to tell you how to spend the money. We have local control, and we have locally elected school boards for a reason. The citizens in that school district want to spend the money in their school district the way it will benefit their kids the best. But the school board's hands are tied many times by legislation. I've visited over 21 elementary schools in my district, okay, and that's a lot. So I spend a lot of time in the schools with kids and with teachers. And I'll tell you what I hear most of the time from teachers. It's not about their personal paycheck. It's about having more help in the classroom and having a reduction in the regulations of the paperwork that they have to fill out. When I saw a superintendent and he handed me a stack of forms, he said, "Look at these forms." And I said, "Well, that's not too bad." Or he says, "No, that's a list of the forms. It wasn't the forms themselves." And I almost fell off my chair. He said, "We have to employ 3 full-time people just to keep Olympia happy with all these forms and all these regulations."
You are listening to live coverage, it's a
send the
live
money
webcast. Send money to Don.
to the local school districts, and let our locally elected school boards be responsible for how to spend that money.
We are coming up on the 45-minute mark, and so I'm going to beg your indulgence and ask if maybe you would like to stay just a little while longer, because I've got lots of questions, and I'm sure that the people at home who are live streaming this couvdotcom special edition of our coverage of the Clark County Primary 2012 would love to hear your responses to some of these questions. And for those candidates who are doing their Oppo research right now by listening live to this live stream, welcome. And I hope that you'll come in front of the cameras next time and answer some of the questions. You know basically what the questions will be. We're asking the same questions of everybody, so we're very, very happy to have you in the future. And you know how to get in touch with us because we've already reached out to you. So this is awesome, and I wanted to thank you very much for allowing me to have a little bit extra time. I did it on camera, of course, so you couldn't actually say no. I'm Victoria Tafton. You hear my program on AM 860 KPAM radio, and I hope you'll give it a listen from 11 to 3 every weekday. So I appreciate you if you're doing that, if you can do that. But now let me ask you this, and let's start. Let's see. Let us start over with Paul Harris. When have you moved either public or private life to expand private property rights for Washingtonians?
Well, say that again.
Either in your private, this is for people who are not necessarily office holders. You have been an office holder. What have you done to enhance and expand personal private property rights?
I think what I've tried to do is to protect property rights, to make sure that I think as we attack personal property rights, that's a basic right that we all have, and we need to make sure that we have the ability to hold on to our property, that we control it, not others, and that when I was on the school board, we did some interesting things at times, and I was one that would stand up and say, hey, if we're going to if we're going to try to take somebody's property, boy, we need to be compensated. And we need to make sure we get buy-in from the community. So I've always stood up for protecting personal property.
Liz, what do you think
Absolutely.
about that? Private property, how important an issue is that to you? And have you ever done something in your private sector life that has advanced the cause of private property rights? And what would you do as a person in office?
I am a big supporter of protecting private property rights of landowners. I think there are a lot of environmental regulations that attempt to take away the use of your own property. Those need to be very carefully weighed. Again, the cost-benefit analysis. In my private life, I'm a political affairs director for a large trade organization, and I've testified before many municipalities in favor of protecting private property rights. So I'll be a big advocate, and every vote I take in Olympia will err on the side of private property rights.
Julie Olson.
Well, I agree with both Paul and Liz. I mean, I think we've seen some serious erosion of private property rights over the last number of years, and even including some Supreme Court decisions over the last number of years.
That's right.
So
In Thurston County, we have the little rodent that
absolutely, yeah.
is
So
committing
and
all
again,
the-
whether it's environmental regulations or animal rights or endangered species or whatever, we're seeing a continued erosion of private property rights. So again, I'll be a big proponent of private property rights. I'm not sure specifically what I've done in my private life to help support or expand those rights, but certainly I'm an outspoken supporter.
on a 1 to 10 basis, 10 being very, very interested and it's crucial, where do you place private property rights in your panoply of
Well,
political
it's
thought?
kind of 8 to 10, depending on the issue. I mean,
Eileen
broad
Q-Tip?
brush.
Eileen Q-Tip, how big an issue is private property rights to you?
I think it is. If you're going to do 1 to 10, it's 9 to 10. You know, our Constitution, basically, the founders of our country wanted a basic right to private property because they came from a place where they didn't always have their own property. And I just think that we need to protect that at every level. And you know, that we've talked about the Department of Ecology, and Liz is going to take a hatchet to it, and I'm glad.
Don Benton, what do you think about private property rights on a scale of 1 to 10?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm disappointed, you guys. It's an absolute 10.
No, it's a 10.
Private property rights is the cornerstone of a free democracy. If you don't have private property rights, you don't have free anything. You've got to have private property rights. It's the #1 right that's protected in the United States Constitution, and many people don't know this, but the Washington State Constitution is even stronger on private property rights than the U.S. Constitution is. And there's a reason for that. The people that came and founded Washington State saw the abuse of private property rights as the country was growing up. So when they wrote this Constitution, they made it much stronger on private property rights. And Rob McKenna, hopefully our next governor, is a strong advocate and proponent of private property rights because it's protected in our Constitution. There's a couple of ways they're being attacked. We talked about the ecology attacks and environmental species attacks, but there's another way. Governments are taking away people's private property rights through the power of eminent domain. And this is not right. And we saw this with the U.S. Supreme Court decision on Kelo in Connecticut. And right after that, I introduced a bill in the legislature that would make our private property rights even stronger and make it very hard for governments to use eminent domain to take away your... Now, if you're going to take somebody's property and compensate them for it to build a school or some public good, that's something that sometimes is necessary, and we do that. But guess what happens? If it's a school or a highway, it's for the public good, and the public shares in the cost of that because we pay the property owner. But if you take it away for the good of an endangered species, that's supposedly for the public good too, isn't it? But who pays for that? The public doesn't pay for that. The property owner themselves are the ones that pay for that.
Okay.
That's what's not right about it.
And thank you once again for going longer. I appreciate your ability and to be flexible. I appreciate that very much. Paul Harris, let me ask you this. We're talking right now, we're live streaming at couvdotcom. And this webcast will be available for you to look at any time at couvdotcom. But to put a marker as to when we're speaking, we're talking on the day before the Obamacare decision is coming down. And the U.S. Supreme Court will tell us what the Affordable Care Act decision is tomorrow. Rob McKenna, the Attorney General, took point on behalf of other states, 27 states, 28 states, on Obamacare. Now, he took a lot of political heat for that. Describe your stance on Rob McKenna's choice to be a part of that 28-state lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act.
Well, I sit on the healthcare committee for the state. I applaud what Rob McKenna's doing. I voted no on the health exchange that we're trying to form in the state. I voted no for one simple reason, and it was pretty simple because when we formed the exchange, and I'm not against the exchange, the idea of the exchange itself is actually a great idea. But what the exchange did is what the controlling party decided to do, the Democrats, was they didn't want to be held responsible for that exchange. So they want to form an unelected board that's responsible for the exchange. And they don't want to own it. And my opinion is, if we're going to create an exchange, we be held accountable, we the elected officials that form it. It's our exchange. If it succeeds, great. If it doesn't, then it's our fault. It's our failure. It's not an unelected board's fault that we're going to appoint that we can say, oh, yeah, well, that's their fault. You know, I see that too often up in Olympia already. That's our exchange. We need to be held responsible for it. Mm-hmm. The idea of the exchange is not a bad idea, but I support hopefully what our future governor Rob McKenna is doing and in fighting what the Affordable Health Care Act, because it's not going to be affordable. Trust me.
Liz Pike, what do you think about what Rob McKenna did, taking a stand and saying that he was going to help in the defense of states?
I completely supported his decision to do that.
All right. Julie Olson.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. And I hope tomorrow the Supreme Court comes down on the right side of that issue
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah,
Eileen
I do
Q.
too. I support what Rob McKenna did. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as you know, the governor threatened to cut the Attorney General's budget if he did this, and so I immediately introduced a bill to make his funding separate from out of the governor's control. So Rob is our Attorney General, is protecting the citizens of this state, and he did good work, and he understands how important it is. My opponent voted for Obamacare, voted for the Health Exchange Act. My opponent voted, I meant to mention this in the education question, voted to cut $4 billion out of the education budget for K-12 education. And so he is much more of a government supporter type person than I am. I mean, I think individuals have a right to make their own decisions about where they go to get their health care. They should be able to pick their own doctors, choose their own course for health care, whether that's chiropractic or medical or whatever. Those are individual choices that individual citizens should be able to retain. I don't think a government committee should decide what doctor you want to go see or should go see.
Let's
So
go to
Rob was on the right track.
let's go to another question, and we'll start with Eileen Q-Tub here. And should Washington State be giving out driver's licenses to non-citizens and at the same time be given a motor voter voter registration? You okay there?
Am I still plugged in?
Yeah, you're plugged in. You can just attach it.
I think your magnet just came and does that.
Well,
No.
Not good, but it's
No,
okay.
done. It's a good thing you're a legislator.
Yeah.
Not somebody- I'm sorry.
We'll get a technical expert.
Yeah, we'll get it.
okay, so
Now, the
should-
question, should Washington State be giving out driver's licenses to illegal aliens? And at the same time, of course, because of the motor voter law, the people at the DMVs are required to give people voter registration information. That to me seems like it's
Yes.
a weird combo.
Yeah, it seems like a strange combo to me as well. First of all, illegal would be the key word here, and if they're illegal, why are they here? I would have, if they're a documented worker, a migrant worker or something, and they need a driver's license to drive around to get to their job, perhaps they can have a driver's license. However, it should clearly indicate what their status is as far as citizen, and I do not agree with the motor voter law. I really believe that people should not just get a driver's license and then register to vote while they're there. So that needs to come to a stop, because we have vote by mail now in Washington, which Oregon has had for several years, and frankly, I just believe it is an opportunity for fraud at many levels.
If we have time, I'll go into a case that the Freedom Foundation found that is setting the table for fraud. Julie Olson, talk a little bit about whether or not you believe that there should be illegal aliens should be getting driver's licenses in Washington State.
Yeah, well, and when you coupled that with the voter motor law, I thought it was a trick question because I don't know how we can support having illegal aliens get driver's licenses and then allowing them to vote via the.
I'm not sure they can vote, but they can certainly register.
Well, they can register to vote, yeah. So I think if they are legally here and they have papers to show they're legally here, they need a driver's license. We issue them a driver's license and they're a guest, worker, whatever. But to have illegal aliens or immigrants have driver's licenses, I don't see it.
Washington is one of the last states allowing it. Liz Pike, what do you think about that?
I can't support driver's licenses for people that are here illegally.
All right, Paul.
Nor can I, and I think we have about 300,000 too many drivers according to I think the records. So apparently we're not doing a really good job at that right now. So absolutely not. We need to document these people. And
It's closer to 4.
is it
actually.
400,000?
About 400,000 driver's
Yeah.
licenses issued in Washington State.
Yeah.
400,000 more licenses than we actually have drivers.
Oh.
So it's well known on the illegal circuit that if you can get into the country,
Go
beat
to
a path
Washington.
to Washington
Yeah.
State quickly because you can get
Yeah.
an official government ID card in Washington State, and you don't have to prove that you're a U.S. citizen. In 49 other states, you do. So once you get the Washington license, you can go anywhere in the
You're good to
country and trade it in for a license in that state and bypass the citizenship requirement in the other 49 states. This is a real pet peeve of mine, as you well know, Victoria. When the budget, the transportation budget, came to the Senate floor last year, I proposed an amendment that would require the Department of Licensing to verify lawful presence in this country before you issue a driver's license. We tied up the Senate for 27 hours on that amendment because the Democrats did not want to have a recorded vote on that amendment. They didn't want to be on the record of voting against stopping people from getting licenses. I'm telling you, the Republicans, if they were in charge of the state legislature, there would be a law passed today that would stop issuing driver's licenses to illegal aliens. We have got, this is a national security problem. It's not just a problem for Washington State, this is a national security problem. You have to remember these bombers came across from Canada.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, there are people coming into this country getting official government ID cards issued by this state because our legislature will not stop it. And it is dangerous and it's a top priority for me.
Okay, I'm going to throw this one out because I've been given the all clear to go a little bit longer because it's just so informative and we're very grateful to be able to have the time to do this. The Freedom Foundation recently discovered that a George Soros-funded group had begun sending dead people and pets, your pet dog, and other ineligible voters voter registration forms. Now, while there's no provable problem as yet, if past is prologue, these registrations will begin to overwhelm the Washington and county elections workers who will undoubtedly, through no fault of their own, just let a few of these in, and therefore you'll have ineligible voters voting. We've seen it with the provisional ballots in 2004 in Washington State. Now, what can you as a state legislator do to make sure ineligible voters don't vote? And do you believe in voter identification? And Paul Harris, I'll start with you.
I believe in voter identification. And I think the only way we're really going to get back to voter identification is to be at the polls again. I mean, for me, what we've got now is a system I believe that has the ability for fraud, unless we're just going to get a lot of people to start looking at signatures and verify exactly what's going on. But the only way we're really going to, we need to have I would love to have the polling back open and let people come in and show that they are who they are and let them vote.
Liz Pike, what do you think?
I share Paul's sentiments, but I don't see the will of the people going that way. I think people like the convenience of voting in their mailbox, but we do have to make sure that our state auditors, our auditors from across the state, from every county, have the ability to share data with the Secretary of State's voter registration
They're
files.
supposed to.
And because I think there's probably some cases where somebody is voting in Clark County, they're also voting in King County. I fully support funding to make sure that that database is merged so that we can pull out those people that are committing. And also I fully support arresting those people that are committing voter fraud and punishing them to the fullest extent possible by our current laws.
Julie Olson, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with Liz. I'm not sure we'd be able to get back to the polls, but we do need to have some sort of voter identification. And when it comes to these registrations that are coming in and having some possibly get through, we do need to support finances and budgeting as necessary so that there's enough people to make sure that those, if we know that there's a concerted effort, then we need to I think, invest in the opportunity to make sure those registrations are legitimate.
Where there are states going through the voter rolls, Eric Holder's Justice Department has actually taken off after them. Could you stand, Eileen Qtub, the political heat that would result if you stood up and said we need to purge the voting list and double check everyone on it?
Yes, I have a history of being able to stand up under the heat, and it's just imperative for our country to do this. It's a privilege we have to vote, and we don't need to allow dead people and dogs and cats and everybody else to do it.
Which is happening in
you know,
Washington State
this
before,
is also not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It is, everybody should be concerned about the integrity of your vote.
Well, I mean, it is the franchise, it's the bottom line, it's the
Yes.
ballgame. Don Benton, I'm sure you have something to say about that. What do you make of that?
Well, I've been through the fights on this. You know, we went to allowing counties to do vote by mail. That wasn't good enough, apparently, because last year the state legislature outlawed voting at the polls. So now counties can't even have poll voting if they want it. Okay, so there must be a reason why the Democrat majority has stopped poll voting in this state. So that troubles me. But that's a separate issue from voter registration. We should be required to show photo ID to register to vote, because then you get your ballot mailed to you. So we don't know who we're mailing these ballots to. People go down and get their driver's license, they have motor voter registration, they register them. You know, I tried to get a law passed that said you simply have to ask before you give them a voter registration card, are you a US citizen? Just ask the question. And I was attacked. You talk about standing up to the heat. I was called a racist. Can you imagine? I don't know what race has to do with it, but people actually called me a racist because I wanted people to show photo ID to vote. What's wrong with that? Like you said, it's not partisan. It's not Democrat. It's not Republican. Has nothing to do with the color of your skin or anything else. What it has to do with is, are you eligible to vote? That means you have to be 18 years old and you have to be a United States citizen. And you ought to be able to prove that before you can get your name on a list where folks just mail you ballots. That's the problem. And what we ought to do, we find out people all the time when they call for jury duty and they find out they're not a US citizen, because we use driver's licenses now, not voter registration, but driver's license. They call them in, and there is no ability for the state Secretary of State to compare with the county court clerks, the people that have been denied jury duty because they're not citizens. But they were called to jury duty because they had a driver's license. So you have to wonder if they're voting. Why don't we take that list and use it up against the voter registration rolls and take those people off the voter? If they can't be on a jury, they certainly shouldn't be receiving a ballot in the mail. But we can't even seem to get that done.
Living the nightmare.
Victoria, just
Yes, Paul.
just one thing.
Sure, why
So, Don, taking off what Don says, I have 5 children, and I've requested, all my children have moved from the home. All of my children still gets ballots.
Yes.
Every one of them. And I've requested that every one of them who has moved out of my home, and I still continue to get their ballots. So do I think there's voter fraud going on?
You bet.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Last question before we get to your closing remarks, and we'll give each candidate 2 minutes to have a closing remark. On behalf of the taxpayers of Washington State, I think I'm secure in telling you that there's a recession going on, and it's the worst recession since the early 80s, and the recovery is elusive. It's getting even more elusive as we speak. And that said, since President Obama took office, the food stamp program, the SNAP program, has expanded by 45%. That's a national figure, 45%. While conceding the need is great, in fact, greater than ever before these days, there's also growing proof of fraud. What are your suggestions for fixing this problem? And in your opinion, what is the biggest issue facing Washington right now with respect to this problem? Now, how would you go about fixing this SNAP food fraud? And Liz Peck, let's start with you.
This is a little bit renegade, but I would like to see mandatory drug testing before any checks are issued. What do you think of that?
I think it's probably a good idea. But they're still hungry. They can be drug takers
Well,
and still hungry. That's the
Then
problem.
they better figure out how to get clean so they can get a job and feed their family.
Julie Olson, what do you think about that?
There has to be some sort of means test for the food stamps. I just saw something the other day on TV where they're literally an advertisement about how easy it is to get food stamps. Or
EBT card.
yeah. So there has to be some sort of means test. I mean, people have to, if they're really hurting and they really need some help, that's one thing. But if it's really easy just to walk down and get your card and go down and buy your Doritos and Coke, that's something else.
Eileen Q-Tub?
I do think that we need to protect those that are not able to eat, but or don't have the funds to purchase what they need to eat. But absolutely, there's fraud. There's fraud in every level of entitlement in government. I know that for a fact, and so we need to reduce the fraud. And we have food banks that give food too. So if people are really in need, they know where to go, and there are some warm hearts that are wanting to clothe and feed them. So people will not go hungry in this nation.
Don Benton.
Well, we've actually taken some steps to try to curb that. Unfortunately, because we're not in the majority, we haven't been able to do enough. But Senator Carroll and myself co-sponsored, and Senator Zarelli, several pieces of legislation, not only this year but last year, that were passed and signed into law that make it illegal. You cannot use these we found these EBT cards being used at casinos.
Exactly.
And tobacco outlets and things of this. Those cards are to buy food for your children. That's what they're for. And if you need it, you should get it. Absolutely. But we shouldn't be seeing these cards showing up in casinos and at tobacco outlets being used to buy things there and using the cash there. We've stopped that now. But there's still some of that going on in other areas because we couldn't get the net tight enough because the Democrats don't want it to be tight enough. They wouldn't let us put the real teeth in it that we wanted to put in it. So we've got a long way to go on that in terms of cleaning up. Look, if people need help, they should be able to get it, no question about it. But whenever you give something away for free, no matter where it is or who it is that's doing the giving, there will always be people that will sign up for it that aren't eligible. We have this in the schools right now. People sign up for free and reduced lunch, but the schools require no proof of income to sign up for that. You just simply sign a form and bring it in. Now, the problem with that is the state uses the percentage of free and reduced lunch at each district to determine how much money they're going to drive out for other things. And so here you have almost a pervasive incentive for the school district to sign people up for free and reduced lunches because it increases the amount of money they get for their lap reading program and for these other programs in the schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should absolutely require proof of income if you're going to be receiving free or reduced lunch at school, free or reduced food from the Department of Social and Health Services. If you're going to get government services, you ought to be able to prove what your real income is.
Paul Harris, you get the final word on that one.
Wow, it's what a badge of honor to wear. An increase of 45% in food stamps. Huh?
Yes, and
wow.
and
You know,
states are being paid bounties to get more people on food stamps.
I understand. What a strange world. And I think about it. It's sad that we're to this point, and people need to have. I think it plays when people are out of work, or there are people who need a hand up, but not a handout, and I think we need to be very careful. And so, to me, what Don said is we need to help these people, but we don't want to sustain a habitual habit. We don't want to start something that we can't get them off of. And I think there's some self-dignity that can be lost after long-term help. And we need to really help these people, not just give them something. Biblically it tells us, teach a man to fish, and you've taught him something. So I think we really need to make sure that we're not sustaining something. So we really need to make sure that we help these people so they can become self-sustaining again. That's where the pride comes, self-sustaining.
Final thoughts. Everyone gets at least a couple minutes to talk about themselves. And Liz, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Victoria Taft, for being here today. Also, thank you to couvdotcom for allowing us to present our ideas at this forum. It's a great way to reach out to voters. I'm excited about my candidacy to become the next state representative in the 18th district. I've been working very hard to get elected. I'm listening to voters, doorbelling all parts of the district, And what I'm hearing over and over again is people are worried about jobs and the economy. So whatever I can do in Olympia, should I be elected, I'm going to try to resolve that terrible issue that is plaguing our county. Some people say our unemployment's about 9%. I think it's closer to 20% when you include all of the people that have just plain given up looking for jobs, and also people that are underemployed that have taken a part-time job when they really need a full-time job. So the two things that I see that can relieve that problem of jobs in the economy the quickest is to reform these state agencies that I mentioned before, Department of Ecology, privatizing industrial insurance in this state. Those two things alone will make it less expensive for our employers to hire new people. Those are the things that I'm going to be focused on, because I know that that is the most critical thing facing our state and the patrons in the 18th district. I've been endorsed by a multitude of people on my website, and I'd really encourage all the viewers of couvdotcom to go to visit lizpike.us. How easy is that? lizpike.us, and you can clearly see all of the positions that I clearly state on important issues facing the district and the citizens in Clark County. Thank you again for your time. I'm going to be one of the hardest working legislators in Olympia. Nobody's going to outwork me on the campaign trail. I ran marathons for 25 years. I'm a finisher of the Hawaii Triathlon. That's the Hawaii Ironman Triathlon.
Wow.
So I take that lifetime of self-discipline, endurance, and stamina with me when I go to Olympia. And I'm going to try very hard to represent the citizens of the 18th district the best I can.
Well, Spike, thank you very much. Julie Olson, final thoughts.
Yeah, and first of all, Victoria, very nice to meet you, and
Thank
thank
you.
you for inviting us here, and thank you for David Medor for allowing us to be here this afternoon as well. You know, this is an important election, especially here in the state of Washington. We need new leadership in Olympia, and it's time for leadership from the governor's mansion to the state house and the state senate, and I look forward to being part of that new leadership team. As a mother, a businesswoman, a voter, school board member, you know, I've become increasingly concerned about the direction of Washington State and the government in Washington State. So my campaign is really going to be about three things. It's going to be about funding education first. That's our paramount duty. We need to do that. It's about passing and being responsible for sustainable budgets. And thanks to Senator Benton and Paul Harris this year, we actually have a balanced budget for 4 years now instead of just 2. We need to get that out to 8 to 10 years so that we know what we can plan for, and our citizens have some idea of some consistency going forward. And then really the last one is what we've already talked about today, which is review, repeal, and reform some of these regulations that are just killing businesses and take the monopoly out of workers' compensation insurance here in Washington. So with my background as a business person, as an athlete as well, I'm a results-oriented thinker. I've always done that with my work life and my business life, my athletic life. I'll bring that to Olympia. I'm independent, innovative thinking, and that's what I intend to do when I'm in Olympia. And I look forward to working with Representative Harris and Senator John Benton. So I appreciate your support.
Got a website you want to?
I do, votejuliolson.com. Sorry, I'm not really good at www.votejuliolson.com.
Okay,
You can donate there too.
Okay, she would like
Way to go.
I link you to it.
Well, thank you, Victoria, for you know, moderating this and giving us these great questions. And thank you, couvdotcom, for inviting us here. It's just been a real pleasure. I think the 49th district has a real opportunity to have new leadership in their district. It is an open seat, so we have a real opportunity to do this, and they have an opportunity to send somebody with some experience. So the person that's leaving had experience. I have experience. I think what I will do, though, is bring a different kind of experience to the district. I will listen to the voters. As they have said, they don't want new taxes. So I will try to keep their taxes low and reform government and make government more accountable. And jobs in the economy, we definitely need to do everything that we can to make sure that the economy is robust again. When the economy is robust, everybody benefits from that, including the state government, so we won't have so much trouble meeting the revenue requirements that we have. And education. We definitely need to fund education fully, but not without reforms that send more money to the classrooms and make sure that our kids are educated and they have academic excellence as one of the criteria that they come away from. And as I said, I do have experience, life experience, work experience, public and private sector. And so I would just ask that you vote for Eileen Qtub. And my website is eileenqtub.com.
Spell your last name. Oh, of course, it's right there.
Q-U-T-U-B.
Very good. Okay, Don Benton.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to you and both to couvdotcom for doing this. This is an excellent opportunity, I think, for voters to see what's going on. And I want to thank you, the voters, the citizens of the 17th District, for allowing me the privilege and the honor of representing you for these many years. It really has been a privilege to do it. I hope you'll send me back to do it again. I hope I've earned your trust. I hope you know that I won't vote for tax increases. I won't vote to enlarge government. I won't vote against education like my opponent has. I won't vote for health care acts like my opponent has. I will help maintain your presence, your thoughts, and my rhetoric always matches my voting record. And I invite any of you to go check my voting record, and you'll see that what I say, I do. And what I do, I back up with fact. I don't tell one group one thing and one group another thing. I own my own company. I'm self-employed. This isn't my career. I don't have to lie to voters to keep this job. I can tell you the truth. I can tell you what I really feel, and leave it up to you to decide whether I've done a good job representing you. I've been endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business. I have an 85% voting record for small businesses. My opponent, less than 20%. I've been endorsed by the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs because of my long-standing position on tough on crime. You may remember I passed the Chelsea Harrison Act, which closed the loophole in the 3 strikes you're out law that caused the murder of Chelsea Harrison here in Vancouver a few years ago. So I ask for your support. I ask you to visit my website, senatordonbenton.com, and I invite you to call me at any time at 574-7369, because I do want to hear from you. Why? Because I represent you, not me. It's my job to represent you. And I can't do it very well if I don't hear from you. So please call me, email me, speak with me. And if you'd like to have a yard sign, we'll bring one out for you. So just let us know. Thank you very much.
Paul Harris, final thoughts.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And I want to thank couvdotcom. I'm Paul Harris. I'm running for re-election in the 17th District. You know, I think one of the most important things that we can realize, what I've realized is through this election cycle, is that education, we need to place education as our first priority and as our top priority. We need to set aside an education budget where we will not be trying to go after those dollars as soon as we end up in a difficult budget. Also, we need to take a look and remember that we don't have a revenue problem in the state of Washington. We have a spending problem. And we do not need to raise taxes in order to balance a budget, folks. What we need to do is reduce spending. We've had an increase in our revenues every year. The only problem has been that we haven't increased just quite as high as we thought. So realize there will be many businesses in these last cycle that has actually lived on less money. The state of Washington has always had more dollars. We just haven't had quite as many as we thought. The increases weren't quite as big. So remember, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And I think the other thing is difficulty is, prioritizing how we're going to spend our money. And that's probably the most difficult thing up there. Realizing that we need to set our priorities and make them straight. I am your state representative. I seek your re-election, and I would appreciate your vote. Go to electharris.com. Thank you so much.
And we want to thank couvdotcom for broadcasting, webcasting, live casting, live streaming this event. And we hope to see this on cable as well. And watch this space, because we'll be doing some more interviews with people who are asking for your vote. And avail yourself of it. This is a unique opportunity, and it's something that the folks who run couvdotcom wanted to make sure you had. They wanted to make sure that you had a place you could go where it's totally transparent, that you could go there, you could hear what people have to say. And to that end, I would suggest that the people who have said that they are not crazy about coming, or they don't necessarily want to be interviewed for this, I want them to change their minds. This is the way it happens, this is the way it goes on, and you don't have to be afraid to come here. Now, I want to say thank you so much for couvdotcom for doing the coverage of the Clark County primary 2012. This has been a unique experience for me, and I want to thank the people who took the time to be here: Eileen Qtub, Julie Olson, Don Benton, Paul Harris, Liz Pike, for being here. Just remember, and I would urge you to do that, remember the people who weren't here. Because if they're unwilling to listen to maybe some questions, maybe they're not necessarily willing to listen to you if they should get to office. Thank you once again, and I want to make sure that you know that we're here for you at couvdotcom, and this broadcast will be here for quite a while. Plus, it'll help you as you get your ballots in the next few days to make some choices that you're going to have to do. And you'll have to make those choices very, very quickly because the ballots are coming out. I think it's July 18th when they drop. August 7th is the election, and drop boxes will be available at 35 different locations throughout Clark County to make it easier for you to vote. Now, keep watching this space. We'll be talking to those people who are running for office, and I want to make sure that you come back to couvdotcom on an ongoing basis so that you know what's going on. And take some time to listen to my program. I'm very happy to be able to give myself a little plug. I don't usually do that, but they gave me permission to do that. And my show's The Victoria Taft Show on AM 860 KPAM from 11 to 3 every weekday, morning and afternoon, right in this market. And I want you to make sure that you avail yourself of that because we do talk a lot about local issues. In fact, I have 1 hour devoted exclusively to local issues, and I spend the other 3 hours mostly talking about the local issues. Till next time, I'm Victoria Taft. Choose well.
This has been a Clark County Primary 2012 election update. Your government, your candidates, your vote. A production of couvdotcom.